It's great.
Just kidding. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Limited Time Only. I'm your host, Spencer, joined by my co-host, Danny Cathro. GP Top 8 competitor, Danny Cathro.
This is true. It is an unexpected title to come from a Legacy Grand Prix, but it was pretty sweet regardless. It was fun.
I like how we were we were calling it that you did it on easy mode by playing Show and Tell.
I had 2 or 3 difficult matches the whole tournament. All the other matches was mulligan. Keep. Show and Tell, win. Oh, yeah. Good game. Yep. Good game.
Oh, man. Congratulations, man.
Thank you.
Going to Kyoto.
Oh, yeah. And
plane ticket?
I'm going to buy it tonight, I think. So I know which one I'm buying. Yeah, Alex showed it to me already. So
cool. Well, congratulations, man. But we're not here to talk about your sick run at the Legacy GP. We're here to talk about some limited, because this is limited time only. This week, we're going to be talking about how we build sealed pools. So not like how we build a specific pool, but actually the process that we go through when building a sealed pool. So like how we do things on that. We also have our color of the week segment. This week we'll be talking about red, which is a pretty great color in this format, so it'll be fun to talk about. But let's start by thanking our patrons. So if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg to support the entire Constructive Criticism Network, this show, the YouTube channel, all of that. Check it out at patreon.com/ccmtg. You can also check out our amazing sponsors, both at play@gamegrid.com and the Mana Base. GameGrid is an amazing place to play Magic. I'm actually thinking about moving to Lehi, Utah, which will put me really close to. Oh yeah, look at Danny. He's like, oh yeah.
Get some matches going in the week. That sounds fun.
Get some Spencer in your life. So I'm thinking about moving to Lehi, Utah, right next to where Danny's at. And there's a really awesome game grid there. You should check it out. It's a great place to play Magic. But also, if you're just looking for great Magic content, the Mana Base is the place to go. They have a lot of really great content creators, multiple GP Top 8 competitors. So check them out at the Mana Base. So thank you so much to both of our sponsors. We really appreciate them. Let's go on to our first segment. So every week on the show, we talk about the biggest movers. So we talk about the things that have gone up or down for us the most in our quote-unquote pick orders. So the cards that we feel like have changed in the format. This can be because people are overvaluing it, because people are undervaluing it, or because we overvalued it or undervalued it. Danny has some interesting ones this week, so I'm going to let him go.
All right. My biggest mover up this week is Thresher Lizard. All right. And my reasoning behind that is that I used to think of it as a fine 3-drop, but it's definitely moved up into a good, it's a very good 3-drop. So my reasoning is that if you have an aggressive red-white normally, but you can also have different colors, but if you have an aggressive red-white deck, Thresher Lizard is really, really good the more that you curve out. So I've seen lots of decks have 4 of the cartouches that only cost 1 mana, and then a whole bunch of 1 and 2 drops, and then they play a Thresher Lizard and they empty their hand the next turn, and it's going to be a 4/4 on turn 4 attacking very, very frequently. And so I've just seen that that's been one of the go-to 3-drops in the really, really hyper aggro deck that a lot of the people are talking about. And I think it makes that deck function better than a lot of the other 3-drops do. So
that's so interesting. You're actually putting this on the level of cards I need for my deck.
Yeah, so I think that if you're trying to build the aggro deck that a lot of people talk about, I think Thresher Lizard is an important aspect of that deck. You would rather have a Thresher Lizard over an Unwavering Initiate because it's going to just be bigger and hit harder if your plan of curving out is working.
Okay. What is your biggest mover down?
Biggest mover down right now is Naga Vitalist. So I still like that card. I just don't think it's as ubiquitously good as some of the other green cards are. So what I mean by that is there's some green decks wherein it's very good, but there's some green decks where it doesn't really ramp to anything.
Sure.
So in green-white, for example, you would much rather have a hooded brawler and then some white 2-drops, and that's going to be a lot more successful of a deck than playing Naga Vitalist and then trying to ramp out a Colossopede. Like you'll just win more games by going Gustwalker, or it doesn't have like Bitterblade Warrior into Hooded Brawler is like way better in green white than going Naga Vitalist into something else.
I don't think they're for the same deck though. I think that Naga Vitalist is like specifically good in like the green black deck, right? Where I can go Naga Vitalist into Crocodile, and then my opponent's like, oh, okay, well I'll pick up my cards. Like let's move on.
And so it does go well in certain decks, but I think I've just kind of moved it down because I was playing it in almost every green deck just because it is a powerful effect. And 2-mana Mana Dorks are generally really good and limited, but I think it has a deck that it goes in. It's like green black or green blue dirtily, and then if you're in green red and green white, you're better served to just play a 2-drop that attacks for more.
Yeah, I can agree with most of that. I think that that cards also moved down for me since I started this format. Mm-hmm. You can't all be Michael Hinderrocker and get double Vitalist, double Crocodile, in your RPTQ top 8. But when you do, that card's really good, and but I think that like you would think that like going for it into Emberhorn Minotaur is like a really valuable play, but the actual value behind a card like Emberhorn Minotaur is actually the other attackers.
Yes.
So.
Yep. So I mean, the card's still great. It's just I don't take it as highly because it just underperforms in other decks. But
sure.
Cool. How about you?
So my biggest mover down is not even close, and I think it's Cast Out. So I just think that when we saw this card, like I thought it was gonna be a bomb.
Yeah, it looks insane. Completely busted, right? Yeah,
and I think it's like kind of medium. Like it's about as good as like a 4-mana removal spell in a fast format you'd expect to be. Like that's all it is. And
like Throttle, is that the 4-mana one? Or Flatten? Which one's the 4-mana one?
Flatten's the 4-mana one. Throttle's the 5-mana one.
Yeah.
It's better than that. It's not as good as like Oblivion Strike was, but that's because of the format. Like it's hard to like. I don't think that they've ever put a removal spell like this in a set this fast.
Yeah, there's Electrify in the same. So, like, it's definitely better than Electrify.
I actually like Electrify better.
Electrify is a worse card for sure.
So here's the reason. Is I think that like the replacement value that I get, and this is kind of how I evaluate cards. This is actually an interesting topic. So how much easier it is for me to get an Electrify versus a Cast Out. I just will pass that Cast Out knowing that I can easily get an Electrify.
Yeah. So
and they're not that different.
An example would be you would rather have a Gustwalker and an Electrify than a Nefkrop Entangler and a Cast Out. Like you'd rather your 2-drops be better.
Absolutely.
And have a slightly worse removal spell because they all do the same thing in this format. They kill a 2 or a 3-drop. Yeah.
Yep, that is a great yes. That is perfect. And then my biggest mover up is a card that everybody has been telling me is like really, really good. And I finally lost to it in a game where I was like, okay, I don't know that there could have been a better card in his deck in that game.
Yeah.
And that was Oketra's Monument. I think that you have to like have lots of white 2-drops to make the card good. But if you have a lot of white 2-drops, the card is quite good.
So I've been on both sides where it's been amazing for me and against me. If you're trying to be aggressive against the Oketra's Monument deck that's like isn't dead right away, it stops everything. Like I tried to play a green deck against Oketra's Monument, and it's like Colossopede, like cast anything. Oh man, that's so good. You could just chump block my Colossopede for every turn for the whole game.
So here's the thing: is that like I've played a lot of games against Oketra's Monument, and this is the first time that it's been good against what I was doing.
So I've run green dummy decks into it, and it was pretty effective. It's just a way to
green black. I've played green black against it a bunch of times, and it's not usually been that good against me.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely just depends on how the cards line up. That's how limited it is a lot of times. Is it'll line up well in certain spots. But
that being said, I now have seen the games where like they like play a bunch of 2-drops following it, and you're like, oh, they have 6 creatures.
Yeah.
And then they're like, pursue glory, kill you, and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm dead.
Hmm.
That's as dead as they come. So I think that the card has moved up for me, and like I'm willing to probably try this deck that I wasn't willing to try earlier.
Mhm.
This is like I just have never tried to draft this deck,
Hmm.
and I might try to now. So
That's great. It's very good.
let's move on to our next segment. Our next segment is Color of the Week. So every week on the show, we want to talk about one of the colors in the format that we're currently in. Right now, we are in Amonkhet. So we want to talk about Amonkhet Red. So Danny, let's talk really quick about the color pairs and the notable
Okay.
commons. Well, let's actually switch this up. Let's start with the notable commons. So when
Okay.
you look at Amonkhet Red, what kind of commons are like the hallmark commons for the decks?
So Magma Spray for sure. I think it's top 2 commons in the set. Most people think it's number 1. I agree. And then Electrify is fine. It's definitely gone down.
I'm losing you, man.
Oh,
Are you guys losing me?
no, I can hear you, but your video is frozen. Are you good? Am I good?
Sorry about that, guys. Skype was just crashing. I don't actually know what happened. Where were we?
We were talking about red, some of the notable.
Oh yeah, some of the key comments. Yeah. So you were saying Magma Spray, right?
Yeah, for sure. That card it's probably the most important common in the whole set. The aggro decks have proven to be pretty strong. They're overdrafted sometimes, but they're still great. And if you have Magma Spray, it trades up so often. And then there's so many like 2 toughness in bomb creatures that even against the slower decks, Magma Spray still overperforms. So it's just great. That card is the best red common by quite a bit. And then I think it's the best common in the set.
Yeah, I think the best red commons for me are Nefcrop Entangler, Magma Spray, Electrify, and Emberhorn Minotaur. I think that you oftentimes will prioritize the removal over the creatures, but I think that those 2 creatures have proven their worth. And then I think there are a few surprise commons for a lot of people. Cartouche of Strength is one that I think surprises a lot of people in like the number of games that it's really good. And then Brute Strength has personally surprised me. I don't know why. Like, it's so good in this set compared to how like Brute Strength has always been playable, but I feel
it's
like
actively good.
Yeah, I feel like it's actually just good in this set, which I don't think has ever been true of a Brute Strength for me before.
Another weird card that's been surprisingly good as a one-of is Fling. I have seen that card just be really good. Like, Brute Strength with Fling together is especially powerful. I've done that a lot in this format. Is you just Brute Strength on your Emberhorn Minotaur, and then Fling your Emberhorn Minotaur, and they just take like 1,000,000 damage in one turn. So
yeah,
that has been good. But yeah, lots of the red commons have overperformed, which makes red like I think it's the second best color. I like white more still by a little bit, but they're both really close and really, really strong.
Yeah, as far as uncommons for red go, I think that Occop Crasher has moved for me as like the best red uncommon over Trial of Zeal by actually a lot.
Really?
Yeah, I think I would
high praise.
I actually think I would pick it over Trial of Zeal.
That card is so dumb. Yeah, I mean,
like, I think that it leads to it does like the same thing in a lot of board states.
Yeah, Trial of Zeal is more versatile. So I would probably still take Trial of Zeal over it. But if I'm in a red aggro deck, I would definitely take
like Crasher. Pack 2.
Oh yeah, Crasher all day. If you're in that deck, yeah. That's what you want.
I mean,
that's the best.
First picking a Trial of Zeal is really powerful because it lets you pick up cartouches really easily, the white cartouche and the red cartouche. Yeah. However, like getting that Occop Crasher is like really powerful. One of the uncommon
the second Crasher even better than the first Crasher.
Yeah, it is. The second uncommon that 2 of them that have kind of been interesting are Warfire Javelineer and Deemworthy have been not what I would expect out of them. So I actually thought that Javelineer would be unplayable. I just didn't think it would work. And it's definitely playable and part of that deck. And then Deemworthy turned out to be like one of, if not the best removal spells in Sealed. And then not as good in Draft. Like, you specifically want to be green-red to play it. But still okay.
Yeah. I mean, Deemworthy still very good, but I definitely see what you mean by it being significantly better in Sealed for sure.
Yeah. I'm just surprised. Like, I saw the card and I was like, I want this in all of my red draft decks. And I do want it in all of my red draft decks, but like, man, I wish this was like an Electrify a lot of the time.
Or a Magma Spray. Yeah.
Yes. That's all the time.
I don't need another card. I'll just Magma Spray. I just want a Magma Spray and play a 3-drop. Yeah. Yeah, the Javelineer, it's mostly blue-red that can make use of that card. But in that deck, it's actually really good. Yeah, it's pretty much only blue-red. But it's really good just because that deck wants to go to the late game, kill you with flyers, and then the Javelineer is just a 2-for-1. It trades for lots of 2 and 3 drops, and then kills a 2 or a 3 drop or bigger later in the game. So it's really strong.
Yeah, let's talk really quickly about these decks and these archetypes that exist. So we'll start with blue red because you're kind of already on that. What are the key cards for that blue red deck? I think for me, it's Javelineer, Magma Spray,
Yep.
and
The Drake.
Random assortment of red cards, probably the Drake.
Yeah, the Drake is obviously insane in that deck, and that's the only blue-red deck that I've seen have success is one that has multiple Drakes in it. Just because you need some kind of win condition, because the goal of that deck is to kind of draw up cards, trade a lot of removal spells with their creatures.
That's also one that I should mention actually really likes Steamworthy because you're able to get a spell into your yard while also making an impact on the board.
Yep. Yeah, and so in blue-red specifically, the Javelineer shines, and you get it really late because no other deck can use it. But most of the other red cards, you really just want Magma Spray. You're like a blue deck with Magma Sprays, like mostly.
Yeah, you kind of get the chaff of a lot of other people, and you hope to get some Deemworthy's Magma Sprays, maybe an Electrify or two, to get that red removal in there. And you actually would prefer removal that goes to your graveyard over something like Trial of Zeal. It's also pretty important. I've also seen this deck be really happy with Sweltering Suns. Like, it's one of the rares that, like, you're really, really okay with in this deck. You're like, yeah, I get a Sweltering Suns people with these Drakes in play. Like, get out of here.
Yeah, no, it's pretty powerful. There's just lots of good. The removal pairs really well with the blue cards. That deck was definitely interesting how it works out.
Yeah, and then we have green-red. I think that green-red is one of the more underrated decks in the format. I think this one is okay with Deemworthy, but I think that this deck secretly is like really happy to get Cartouche of Zeal and Okrop Crasher, and people really attribute those cards to like much more aggressive decks. But if you put a Cartouche of Zeal like on a Colossopede, and then they like look at their board and one of their guys can't block, and you're attacking with 6, like they're probably chumping. And that Cartouche of Zeal was like 1 red, kill target creature a lot of the time.
Yeah. No, green red. I think you can get good green red decks that play out pretty aggressive, especially with like the Crocodile, the Crossing. That's great. And then you get the cheap red removal, good red 2-drops, and so you can curve out and do pretty well with that. There's a lot of cards that you don't utilize in those colors when you pair them together. So there's some weaknesses to the color combination, but you can definitely get really good decks when you get the right cards in the right order and stuff. So
we've kind of talked about this next deck a little bit when we talked about black. We actually had talked about it a lot, which was black-red. There are 2 sides of this. People either love this deck or they hate it. What side are you on right now?
I don't play it normally, but I've seen it be fine. It's a deck that other people can play. For me,
what is the reason that you don't like it?
I think some of the best black commons don't go in this deck. So, like, it's black-red is an aggro deck at heart, right? And then in this format, it doesn't play out very aggro because the black cards aren't super aggressive. So you don't get any like good removal for an aggro deck to pair with your red cards, and then so just kind of the discard theme doesn't come together very well because
I think that's really what it is having this theme of like wanting you to discard cards in a deck that honestly, like, if I discard cards in my aggro deck, like I'm gonna lose.
Yeah, and you don't have any cards. Yeah,
like it's like these cards are not like 5/7 hastes, that make me discard 2 cards, and when I discard those cards, they come into play for free like some discard aggro decks, in some card game. All I'm saying is that's not how it works in this one. When I discard that card, it's typically gone.
Yeah. And a few sets ago we had Madness, where that black-red deck was pretty good because you could get value out of your Madness cards. But in here, like, you're actually just discarding them. Like, you can trigger some stuff. So if you have some bombs that trigger off of discard, then it can be okay. Like, I've had an Archfiend in a black-red deck, and that's been really good because you have a big payoff for discarding, and then you can look for the Ruthless Snipers and stuff. But there's just not enough payoffs for discarding to make it worth it. So the cost is just too much, and the deck just doesn't come together very well.
All right, why don't you talk about the best deck in the format, as that's kind of where we are now.
Yeah, red-white is pretty clearly the best deck in the format. So if you were to go back in time and play drafts like online or wherever in the first week of the format, and you just jammed red white every game or every draft, you'd probably just sweep them off the table with people because it's so
I
good.
feel like we knew that in Pro Tour testing though. Like
Yeah, maybe not to this extent though. Like Mason was telling a story of how at the RPTQ that he was commentating at, 4 of the 8 people at the table drafted red white, specifically red white. And that's not very common. I think it's just completely well known. Red white's the best. And it's well deserved. Like there can be 2 red white decks that are both awesome at the same table because it's just so deep. The 2 and the 3 drops are really deep, and you can just get your curve filled out combined with good removal.
I think it's just because like this deck, I'm so happy with just things like Pathmaker Initiate, right? That like it's like I don't actually care if I get a Pathmaker Initiate or a True Heart Duelist. Like they do the same thing.
Yeah,
and that's powerful.
Cartouche of Solidarity for some reason is just like a good card. You just put it on something and like, all right, can you kill it? If not, you're dead. And it just works. There's just not enough things that kill it, and then you win. So
I think that, having everything be really level with each other, but also really happy to have any of those things is really what sets this deck apart. I'm not of the opinion of some people like, I have yet to be happy with the Bloodlust Insider. I know.
Yeah, it's very situational.
I know I'll get flack for it, but I'm not. I'm certainly not ever first picking one.
No, I've played it. It's been really good when I'm on the play and I have it turn 1, but it's also been horrible lots of other times. So, you know what you're getting when you play that card. Sometimes you have it on you have it on turn 1, and then other times you don't. So, but
yep. All right, let's learn. So where do we think red stands? I think you kind of answered this at the beginning. I think it's the second best color of the format. I think it has the best removal in the format. It just so happens that I might rather have a Gustwalker than most removal spells. So having a white common that I might consider taking over basically every common but Magma Spray is like pretty weird.
Yeah. Yeah, especially white 2-drop is just like better than unconditional black removal, unconditional or practically unconditional red removal. Like it's good.
Yeah. Yep. So that's it for red and where we think it stands in the format today, what we think of the cards. Let's move on to our training ground. So every week on the show, we want to talk about something that makes you better at life or Magic in general. This week, we are talking about how we build in sealed. So specifically, what we do to try and build our sealed pools correctly. And we're gonna start from the very beginning. You open your sealed pool, Danny.
Yes.
You sit down. How do you organize it?
I sort it by color, then multicolor, artifact, and then lands.
Yeah. So if you had a PPTQ or an RPTQ, you're actually supposed to get your sealed pool this way now.
Mm-hmm. And so
it's supposed to be handed to you organized now.
So I look at that, and then I look at all of my rares and my mythics.
Okay, we're not there yet. Hold on.
Oh, okay, good.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Okay.
So one of the things that I do once I get that sealed pool handed to me is I will immediately go through the cards and just separate them into playable and unplayable into those stacks. So it'll just be playable, unplayable, even a little bit playable.
Yep.
So then I'll have a stack of playables, and then I'll actually just be able to immediately see what colors are available to me. And then also, what do we look for in those stack of playables?
A curve.
You just said one of them. You said one.
Oh yeah. You look for the bombs. Yep. So that in sealed, especially nowadays, the colors are a lot deeper than they used to be. So in older sets, I've heard that there was just half the set was completely unplayable garbage in limited. And now that's not really true. There's like a few cards that are unplayable, but the vast majority of cards are fine. Like they're random dudes. And so your bombs, like your mythics and your rares, are way, way better than that. So they can pull you pretty strongly to a color. Like if you open a Glorybringer, it'll take a lot for you to not play red as at least your second color. You can just play a deep color that has a good curve and then play red because you have a Glorybringer. So bombs, I think, are the number one thing that I look at when I'm starting what I want to build. You're muted right now, by the way.
Sorry, I've been coughing so much on this episode. I'm gonna cough again. The other thing that I look at is kind of how deep the colors are for me. You know, it's really important to me that I kind of look at that and to really ease my brain, right? Like it's so easy to like be like, oh, I have like 16 black cards. This is gonna be great. And then like you get to them and it's like, well, do I really have 16 black cards? Because after I'm like sorting out this pile, a lot of my black cards are like not that great. It's actually just like a whole freaking bunch of like
June beetles,
lay bare the hearts and nest of scarabs, right? It's like, okay, well, this doesn't really work. Or it's like, or even worse, sometimes it's like, okay, so I have a ton of playable black cards, but they're all pitless viziers, and like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a 5-mana card, right? Where it's just like, okay, these are playable, but like, can I play them?
Yeah.
And then you have to consider your curve, right? So you have to go into like, okay, I have a prerequisite number of 2-drops that I need to play. What do I think that number is? And then find the colors that fill that rule. You have a prerequisite number of 3-drops that you kind of want to be playing. What is that number, and what colors fill that? And that's kind of where I start.
Yes. I have one thing that I tend to do a lot. So building sealed pools can be a little overwhelming, especially if depending on the sealed pool. So after I look at my bombs, I will literally just eliminate up to 2 colors. So I will look at my bombs, and then so the colors that have completely ridiculous cards in them, I will keep those. Like, I could play this. And then if a color doesn't have a bomb in it, I look at it, and if it doesn't have any reason to play it, like if it's not super deep, doesn't have good removal, I'll just, okay, we're done with that color, and then I just get rid of it. And I'll normally come back and look at it a little bit, but for simplicity's sake, I like to go down to just like 3 colors that I'm looking at, and then decide from there.
Yeah, I actually completely agree. I kind of do the same thing. And I typically find that if I start out by just making those piles of playables and unplayables, it will just immediately eliminate colors.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, well, I only have 5 playable white cards. Like, unless one of my colors is this many cards deep, I'm just not playing white.
Yep. Yeah. It happens with blue a lot. I feel like blue, you either have a good blue deck, or you look at blue and you're like, hot garbage. All right, get rid of blue. But it's just, it can happen with any color though. You can just look at a sealed pool, be like, this color does nothing, goodbye. And then it makes your computation so like you just don't have to think about as many options if you simplify it like that.
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the other things that I kind of look at that's really important to me is color fixing and removal. So it's really important that, like, while I'm looking through my sealed pool, is like, okay, how many colors am I reasonably playing, and what does my fixing look like within those colors? You know, so for example, we played you and I played a PPTQ at Paragon City Games.
Yes.
And I opened my deck, and I had Archfiend, Drakehaven, Sphinx, and definitely enough cyclers.
Yeah.
And then I had double illusionary wrappings as my removal. And I'm like, oh man, like, is this enough removal? And then I remembered the pre-release that we played where we had like a cycle land in red and an evolving wilds and double electrify that we put in that deck. So I immediately went and noticed, I was like, oh, I have 2 evolving wilds and an electrify and a Deemworthy.
Perfect. Great.
Done. I found a free splash of, you know, expensive removal spells that were able to fit into this deck. And this can happen in a lot of different ways, right? So like you have this blue-red spells deck, and you're like, oh man, I'm like 2 removal spells short because I'm in blue. Also, this usually happens when you're a blue deck. Is kind of where you have to reach and like splash for that cast out or splash for that whatever. and go and find that fixing, and also find that playable removal. And typically when I'm splashing my removal, it's not going to be like a magma spray. It's going to be something closer to like an electrify or
Final
like
reward. Yeah.
Why is that, Danny?
Magma Spray is the most powerful on turns 1, 2, 3 when it's a high tempo play. But on turn 5, you don't really need to kill something that has 2 toughness. You just can play a creature, any creature. And so you mostly want to splash hard removal that can deal with bombs and not tempo removal that's just supposed to kind of keep you on pace early game. Because you just won't have the colors reliably in the early game. But you will have it more reliably in the mid game and the late game.
Yeah, completely agree. Is the number of removal spells within a color going to put you off of it? Because it does for me. So like, it kind of depends. If I think that I have a great deck, but I only have one total way to kill an opposing creature or to interact with my opponent, I probably am actually going to look for another deck.
Yeah. So a very common question that I ask myself while I play sealed is when I'm building a sealed deck is how do I win with this deck? So if you are in a room filled with sealed decks, what makes my deck either consistent enough to win, powerful enough to win, like bomb rares, fast enough to win? Like or have a lot of flyers so that you can beat board stalls. Like there's lots of different ways to win in Magic. And lots of different ways to like construct a deck to have advantages in certain scenarios, right? But you want to make sure that your deck is good at something. Because if your deck is just a bad version of what everyone else is going to play, you're not going to have any success. And so I've had decks that had very little removal, but had like a great curve, like 7 2-drops, 6 3-drops, like a bunch of like 1 and 2 mana combat tricks. And I've played decks that had actual 0 removal spells, but looked like that, and I top four in RPTQ, like got through the sealed section of RPTQ with that deck that had no removal, actually 0 removal spells, but I could win games because I could just be faster than what other people are doing, and that's something that sealed could do.
I think that's one of the exceptions to the rules, right? So, a good example of this is you kind of mentioned like flyers or going under them. I would say that combat tricks are a way to interact with your opponent, though.
They are, yeah.
Right?
They can substitute as removal spells if your deck is reliably fast enough to put your opponent on the back foot.
Whereas I don't know that you would have played that deck if you had no combat tricks and no removal.
Yeah.
You might have been like,
it was unplayable
this is literally 24 creatures. I don't think I can play this deck.
Yep. But that like thought process of trying to figure out how your deck wins, I think that's one of the huge ways to get better at building sealed decks. Because
yes, I agree.
I've seen so many sealed decks that just don't do anything. They have no game plan. They just kind of play stuff.
They just have this guy that you pay a bunch of mana to turn your vehicles into guys. And
game plan. Sensor,
you don't really have a way to crew your vehicles because all you have in your deck is vehicles. And
game plan. That deck had a game plan.
Yeah, was your game plan your opponent's casting 5 mana, discard a card?
Shh.
Sorry,
game
they
plan.
discard a card.
Yeah. The game plan
was
to play. All right, so I played in GP San Jose, and my seal pool was atrocious. Like, really bad. Bad removal, like. It was horrible. Really bad. But I had the 2/1 first striker that gear shift ace that gives vehicles first strike, and I had the 3/1 flyer for 4 that gives vehicles flying. And then luckily for me, I had like 7 very playable vehicles. By very, I mean moderately playable vehicles. And so I deduced that the like highest upside deck that I could build would be one that was like lots of vehicles, and then I had a Peace Walker Colossus that could animate them to make the bad vehicle to creature ratio better. And yeah, my opponents played like idiots sometimes, and that happens. But
what do you mean they played like idiots? What happened?
So in that tournament, in those rounds, I had one opponent cast a Rishkar's Expertise with no creatures on the battlefield. So they draw 0 cards
And then you asked him if he would like to put a 4-drop into play, and his answer was,
No, it's your turn. So that wasn't the best play I saw. And then I had another person attack their 6/6 into my 6/6 first strike vehicle because he thought Battle of the Bridge was a sorcery, or was an instant when it's a sorcery. And then he didn't cast it, and then lost the game because he couldn't kill
He
my
attacked,
vehicle.
lost his guy, and then
Post combat could have still won the game just by killing the Iron Tread Crusher. Instead, shameful past the turn because.
But the important lesson here was that you identified what to do with this bad seal pool.
Yeah, it was a horrible seal pool, but I went 7-2 with this really bad seal pool because I could get draws that won games. Like, I activated the 7-11 on turn 4 all the time and hit people with like a 7-11 flyer. I was like, all right. I mean, that wins games. And so if you can build a good deck that has good win conditions, that's much better. But always having a win condition is really, really important when you're looking at your seal pool.
What do you think is the correct number of lands that you typically want to play in a sealed deck, and how do you determine it?
Okay, so it's based on format. The consensus is 16 or 17, barring like weird stuff happening. I think a lot of the more recent formats have been switching to 16. Like a year ago or 2 years ago, everyone just told me 17, and that's kind of just had been the accepted correct number. But I feel like the last several sets, the correct number has been 16. Like
in sealed?
Yeah, like in the I'm like.
So it depends, right? So like if you had no Lay of the Lands, that wasn't true.
Yeah, well, no, Attune with Aether just counts as a land. Like,
but that's what I'm saying though, is like if you don't have an Attune with Aether or the artifact that goes
map,
then you actually don't.
Renegade map, yeah.
They count as lands, so you're still playing 17 lands.
So I've actually seen a lot of people kind of talk about this topic and like actually just think that you should play 16. So if it's in a format where you're prone to flooding. So in Kaladesh and Aether Revolt, they had energy as like one of the major themes. And so in those sets, energy replaced mana sinks, generally speaking. And so the consensus was to play 16 lands, like excluding Renegade maps. Like Renegade maps still counting as lands because you have no mana sink. So if you draw 6 lands, you're just down a spell to your opponent. Whereas in older formats that don't have energy and stuff, you have mana sink. So if you draw a 6th land, you can activate this ability and play a spell. And so you could make use of this extra mana. But recently there hasn't been as many good mana sinks, and so the extra mana just doesn't do anything. And so it's more beneficial to play 16 so that you can that you don't flood out. But But I've also played 17 lands a ton. I'm not saying that 17 lands is wrong. But I've seen that come up more frequently without mana sinks in the formats. So
yeah, so for me, it kind of depends on the deck a lot. There are times where I'll play 16 lands. My default is 17. The math is actually less than 17. Like if you actually look at like the percentage of lands you want, it is in fact less than 17. But it's kind of a risk reward factor. Yeah. I think it's 16. Is it 16.7 or 16 point? It's either 16.7 or 16.3.
I mean, it depends on how many lands you want to play.
Exactly. And so there's a choice there. There are a lot of people for a long time in Magic that were always like, you're 18 lands on the draw and sealed all the time, and we just don't live in those formats anymore.
Yeah.
Like sealed decks somehow have like cohesive game plans now. And so like you're not these battle cruiser Magic 18 land
play every 7-drop that you open.
That's not a thing anymore. And speaking of that, like the play draw thing, old Magic players will tell you that you're always supposed to be on the draw and sealed, and that is just not true anymore.
No, not at all. Another really influential aspect of whether I play 16 or 17 lands, because I think that's really what I go between most. Like you can find weird scenarios where you play different numbers, but I think I played 18 lands once ever in sealed. I mean,
And I've played a
I think
14 land deck once ever.
no. So BFZ Oath, you played 18 lands. That was like consensus, correct? When everyone played like
Yeah, there were
three
some,
of the 7 drops, right? Like
Yeah,
there was the
that's
Ruin
true.
Processor format. Yeah.
So, so in BFZ, I think you're right. I didn't do that in
Yeah.
Oath.
Whichever format you just played all the Ruin Processors that you opened.
So in that deck. But if you were playing red blue, which was like the best deck, or you definitely weren't playing 17 lands in that deck.
No, but it was definitely like a thing that happens. It's the exception,
or
but it does happen.
What I meant, but yeah.
Okay. So a lot of how I determine how many lands I want is what my best spells are. So, for example, if I have a Glorybringer, I'm gonna mostly play 17 lands because I want to cast my Glorybringer on turn 5.
Yeah.
And if I can do that a lot, I'm gonna win a lot of games. And then if my best cards are like 2 drops and 3 drops, and I have a good curve, but maybe my deck is like weaker, then I'll play 16 lands, because if I flood out and I just have a bunch of 2 and 3 drops, I'm gonna lose. And so the composition of your deck and like the specific cards that are in it can also influence your land count. Not just the curve, but also like if your bombs are really good 5 drops, play an extra land. You just want to cast your bomb 5 drops. But if your plan is to curve out and beat down, even if that means like you have a bunch of 4 drops, you can play 16 lands, because you're going to lose if the game goes long, because you don't have Glorybringer, or you don't have Archfiend, or you don't have Dust Dawn, or whatever it may be. So taking those things into consideration, building your mana base is a big deal also.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. So, I think that's it on kind of like how we build our shield pools kind of thing. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. We'd be happy to talk. I mean, I love Sealed. Sealed is my actual favorite Magic format. People always think I'm crazy when I talk about it, but I think it's literally the place where preparation and format knowledge and skill actually just give you the biggest edge in all of Magic.
Yeah.
And I think it's bigger than Draft. I think it's bigger than Standard. I think it's bigger than Legacy. I think it's bigger than Modern. I just think that Sealed gives you the most edge, and it is my actual favorite Magic format.
Yeah, I heard Sealed described as the only format that you can perfect. And that was really interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's totally accurate, but it makes sense, right? Like you have a closed group of cards, and there is an optimal build and like an optimal sideboard plan, like whereas in Draft you have so much unknown information that you can make mistakes even though they weren't really mistakes, and there's lots of like ambiguity. But in Sealed, like there's a right build almost always, right? And you can figure it out and you can play it perfect, and that's like a cool feeling to have that to strive for. So
absolutely. So we're not going to do a how you would build it this week, because our topic was literally Sealed, and that's kind of like our way to get Sealed into episodes. Don't forget to check out our sponsors at play@gamegrid.com and the Mana Base. If you are looking for Sealed product, the Mana Base is sponsored by Fusion Gaming, that has awesome Sealed product on their website. So check that out. Just go to the Mana Base's website and you can click on Fusion Gaming and buying product right at the top. Don't forget that you can support the show by becoming a patron. You go to patreon.com/ccmtg to become a patron of all of our content. Everything is really appreciated, and it means the world to us every time we get those notifications. If everybody listening to this podcast and all of our others just donated $1 or more per month, Danny and Michael and I could pursue Magic full time. It would be super awesome. So, Danny, where can people find you?
I'm mostly on Twitter at DJ Cathro, and then also on Facebook it's Daniel Cathro. I think it's Daniel. Probably says Daniel. And then I'm on the Constructed Criticism Facebook page. So
yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer13H. You can find me on Facebook at Spencer Stephen Howland. You can find me in that Constructed Criticism Facebook group. Just ask for a join. We'll get you added as long as you're not trying to sell cheap Ray-Bans. You can also tweet at us with hashtag What's the Pick. Hashtag What's the Pick is our Twitter outreach program. If you tweet it, we'll read it. We don't have any this week. It's when you don't do a consistent podcast and you go on and off as to whether you want this to be a segment, it's actually hard to get the Twitter things rolling. So if you have an awesome,
I have a great idea.
Yeah.
People should send us Vintage Cube What's the Picks.
That's what I was just gonna say. Is if you have Vintage Cube picks,
Oh,
please
yes.
post them.
Oh,
So,
yes.
just take a screenshot of your moto picks and post them in there. Anything in the first 3 picks where we can see the other picks, we would love to talk about them on the show. Just tweet it with hashtag what's the pick. If you tweet it, we'll read it. You can subscribe to the show here on Twitch every week when we go live, here on YouTube if you're watching there. If you're listening to the podcast on MTG Cast or Constructive Criticism, please go to iTunes, go to whatever your podcasting app is, give us a subscribe, leave us a review. We would really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you guys all next week.
See ya.